This is Bleav in Buckeyes. I'm Bryant Browning with All-American cornerback Chimdi Chekwa. How you doing, man? We had a draft, man, up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was like, I think like 250,000 people there. It looked crazy, man. How'd you enjoy the draft, yo?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't initially plan on watching the draft, especially not all the rounds. But every time I tried to look away, I was looking for somebody else to get picked. So Ohio State having so many players in the draft forced me to stay glued to the TV. Also, kind of wanted to see where Shadur ended up as well, which was kind of the talk of the draft as well. So, yeah, but ultimately it was cool. A lot of interesting people coming to make the announcements for who they're picking and all that. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it
Yeah, that's
overall.
good, man. Yeah, I usually watch the first round. Like it's like almost must see TV for me. But usually I kind of taper off. But like you said, so many Buckeyes, I didn't watch it all, but I stayed to my phone and kind of just kept refreshing. All right, where we at? Where we at? Who we got? Who went where? So yeah, I think all in all it was a very entertaining, man. But obviously, we got to talk about our Ohio State Buckeyes, man. They had themselves I'm about to say a night, but I guess it's a draft. But they start off with a great night, right? First round, we get 4 guys in the first round. Some guys that we thought was little, maybe, up in the air on, end up landing spots in the first round. When you start talking about Josh Simmons and Tyleik Williams getting picked up in there with Donovan Jackson and Emeka. What's your thoughts about those guys going in the first round and how they made it, playing this last year here at Ohio State, they may improve their draft status to kind of get to that first round status.
Yeah, I initially thought Donovan Jackson played his way into the first round just because of his versatility. I mean, the level of value he showed being able to play the guard, play the left tackle position, move around. I mean, that's hard to pass up. And based on need, you can end up in the first or the second round. You get to that later part of the first round, teams are really drafting for what they need. And they're typically teams that, performed for, and, winning seasons, et cetera, looking for specific needs. So I was glad to see him get his name called. And then Simmons as well. I think for him, he was kind of a projected first round guy, but because of the injury, you don't know how far
right.
that hurts him or how far he slips from that. But that was huge. And then Tyleik, man, first round, second round, wherever he got picked, man, he's a dog, man.
Yeah.
He's a dog, and you know how it is with the defensive linemen. They're those guys are premium. So based on his performance, he definitely played himself up there. So it was good to see that Ohio State had the guys in the trenches that were worthy of first round picks. And it showed because there are national championships, and you know how you get to a national championship. I do think, interestingly, two offensive linemen in the first, 2 running backs early in the second.
Yep.
Just showing the power and the strength of that Ohio State run game, right? So, that was good to see.
Yeah, I think it is, man. Obviously, so we got Mecca who went is the first guy off the board. And I think he's been a first round draft pick, potentially for the last couple of seasons. There's always a debate. Will he be the number 1 wide receiver, number 2 wide receiver off the board? I think he landed at that 2 spot going to the Buccaneers. They got some talented wide receivers, so you kind of get to learn with some really good guys. Obviously, you got a capable quarterback and Baker Mayfield and the things that he could do. Donovan Jackson.
Real quick with
Yeah.
Emeka though, because I don't think not everybody understands how. I mean, you hear the projection. You hear him. He's been projected as a first round talent wide receiver for a while, but we don't necessarily view him in the same light as Marvin Harrison, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. Jackson Smith and Jigba per se. Like, we don't necessarily view him in the same light. And when I watch him play, he, to me, out of all of those guys, is more like JSN in terms of what he can give a team, playing that slot, really pressuring defensive backs, in the middle of the field, working the middle, working the zones, really putting pressure on you to have to flip your hips and try to minimize that separation, and then being able to catch the ball in tight windows. But then on top of that, he does so much else for you. It's like
right.
It's like he's one of those guys. There's certain guys on defensively where they're like really quarterback friendly. Like, you may have a guy like Marvin Harrison on the outside or some of these explosive outside receivers or whatever, but there's certain guys that a quarterback is always looking for, because he's almost always going to be in the right spot to make it easy on the quarterback to make the play. And that's who Emeka Egbuka to me is, and I think that's what his value is, and that's why. And you add on the fact that he's a little bit bigger than JSN, but he also
Oh
has
yeah.
he also has a lot of speed and after catch ability as well. That's why he's for sure, to me, was a lock for a top 20 pick. And he went up right there around what, 18, pick 18.
Yeah, I think pick 19. Yeah.
Pick
Yeah,
19.
but like you said, his built, like, right? I mean, obviously sometimes you see guys on TV and you don't quite, you don't really quite get it, right? You see a guy that's really fast, he's a little bit slender, right? And you'll see a guy that's like, oh, he's just a big guy. You kind of see it in his height and the way he kind of looks lined up to next to like maybe defensive backs when he's fighting for a ball. Emeka is like built. He's an NFL player. Like he's
Right.
like very stout, very strong guy. He's very high character. Like after the draft, a lot of scouts were just saying like, yeah, he's our favorite prospect in the draft, period. Just because all the things he could do on the field, who he is as a person, you just know that he will going to have success at the next level, with this work ethic and just who he is as a person. And I feel like that kind of fits for Donovan Jackson as well, right? Him playing guard for essentially 4 years at Ohio State. We get a little banged up. Simmons go down at tackle. We have a rough game against Nebraska at the tackle position. They say, hey, we need to pick one of our guys here. We got more experience inside. Hey, Donovan, can you go to left tackle? And in a week, right, he moves over to left tackle with his first start being against Penn State and having to try to figure out how to block Abdul Carter coming off the edge, the number 3 pick in his year's draft, right? And he does it, seamlessly, right? And then from there, he goes on the stretch to lead us to the playoffs, all at that left tackle position, and played the position really, really well, and definitely was dominant there. And then from there, Tyleik, right? Big guy, right? Talking about a big guy going to the Detroit Lions, a tough football team who needs tough guys like Tyleik in the middle of that defense to kind of hold things together. And he could definitely do that. As you look at Simmons going in the first round, and I would just say that his improvement from year 1 to year 2 at Ohio State, you say he was kind of projected. I didn't quite see him as projected that high until this season. And you kind of got to see him kind of really understand what he needs to be as an offensive lineman, where he needs to go. And once he kind of got locked in there, then his talent could really flourish, right? Then he could show his quickness off the ball, his hand placement, and really dominate guys in that fashion. So, yeah, I think they went on a great run. Then, like you say, second round, obviously we get Judkins. He goes to the Browns. That's my team, right? You get to the Browns. Excited that we picked up a Buckeye. Henderson goes to the Patriots. Get coached by a Buckeye coach there, right? And then you got JT who goes to the Colts in the second round as well. What's your thoughts about JT getting into that second round spot where I guess, it could be debated or not, was he going to be more of a mid-round guy compared to just a day 2 guy?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure where guys were gonna end up, but I always felt like JT was a second round to third round talent. Now, how it ends up playing out on draft day, you just never know for sure. But I think he has a talent to be in that position. He always felt like maybe a round or a decent amount of picks above Jack Sawyer, to me, in terms of prospecting to the NFL. So I like where he ended up, obviously being in that second round. It was cool to see him get picked there. I thought even if he came out last year, he had the potential to probably be a second round pick, and that's just me personally. I think what was interesting to me, you talk about Judkins and Travion. I mean, this is the 2 running backs that share carries, both get picked in the second round. I mean, to me, it just shows like, because in football, the reality is having to share carries or not being the true number 1 guy. You got Travion Henderson, who's the number 1 running back coming in, and they bring in another running back. Like, that could make you feel a certain way. And, Travion invited, that dynamic of them sharing those carries, and they both benefit from it, right?
Yeah,
they both
right.
in the first round. In the same way, Emeka Egbuka, who was never the number 1 receiver at Ohio State. He was never the number 1
Which
receiver.
just sounds crazy, right? That sounds nuts, right?
Sounds crazy. He gets picked in the top 20, and he was never the second receiver to go in the draft, but he was never the number 1 receiver. He was a guy that would go in there and crack the defensive man, go crack the linebacker, go block. and do a lot of the dirty work. And that selflessness and with all the other, talent and all the other stuff, led to where he was at. And then Donovan Jackson, I think another guy who just kind of shows you what this championship roster was about. Being able to, because there's a scenario where he could have said, I don't want to move to left tackle. Like, I am projected as a decent high pick, maybe a second round pick at guard right now. And if you move me to left tackle, you expose me to being
Just
put in a
bad
situation.
film.
Right. Right. You go put me out there on the island, and I could get lost on this island, and now I'm looked at in a different way. And he just kind of went with the flow, and it actually propelled him up, I think, even more. So, I just think overall, those guys kind of show why this team was, ended up being where it ended up as a national champion.
Right. And then, so this kind of just listing off the guys. Obviously, Cody Simon goes 4th round to the Cardinals. Lathan Ransom goes 4th round to the Panthers. Then Jack Sawyer goes 4th round as well to the Steelers. I feel like, obviously, I think that's, not going to argue those landing spots for those guys. But I guess you kind of feel a little bit good about a Jack Sawyer getting to the Steelers when first off, you got Cam Hayward, the big OG Buckeye on the defensive line. But he goes to a program that values defense and is going to give him every opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, and we put a lot of stock into where guys end up drafted wise, and we sometimes forget to really look at the situation. And I think Jack Sawyer, he ends up in a really good situation for him. If you do go 4th round, 5th round, or really 3rd round and back, basically, or 4th round and back, that situation is hugely important. And I think he ends up in a good place for him. I think he was probably, he was projected as a mid-round player, so that could have been, he could have went to me as high as 3rd or later 4th round, really depending on need. But, I like the fit. I like where he ends up, and I look forward to, watching them. Steelers got 2 of our guys.
Yeah. So they kind of keep this called up guys. Ty Hamilton goes 5th round to the Rams. Also in the 5th round, we got Hancock to the Bills, and then Denzel Burke also in the 5th round to the Cardinals. Obviously, Hancock and Burke, those are guys, right? They've been guests on our shows. So 2 Buckeyes that we always look up to, and
they
2
basically
guys
go
that
at
you
the
try to
same
mention.
time. They basically get drafted.
Right. I think 2 spots different.
Like 3 picks.
But I'll be honest, I feel a little, I don't know. I feel like Burke went a little bit later than I guess I anticipated. If you would have asked me to say what Burke would land in this draft, before, it actually takes place. I guess, what's your thoughts on that? Any idea? Obviously it's a draft. It's weird, right? Weird things happen, right? Ask DeSantis, right? Things happen. But what are your thoughts on Burke and, not coming off the board into the 5th?
I think the Oregon game hurt him. So personally, I think the Oregon game hurt him, and I don't think there was another game that he can kind of get it back. It's when information comes out, when you play football, information comes out, and they start to question things about you. You have to basically do something to eliminate those questions. All right, to answer those questions. All right, so Burke comes out to the pro day and runs a 4.3 40. All right, it eliminates any question about does he have the speed to and all that other stuff. Or if he comes out and they measure him, he's like, oh, he got this crazy length, big hands and stuff. It answers some of those questions. If he goes to the Senior Bowl and he does one-on-ones over and over again, and they're there and they're watching it and they're seeing his hips move, they're seeing him recover, they're seeing him go up and get the ball versus top talent that's in the draft currently, it answers some of those questions. But none of those things happen, right? And the way Ohio State played defense, post Oregon game, it was good for the overall group, but it didn't really a lot of times showcase the corner. Just straight press, one-on-one against top talent. You didn't see a ton of that in the playoffs, etc. So it's not easy to go back and answer those questions. I think if he came out last year, probably a 2nd round pick. And coming back for another year, I think potentially hurt his draft stock. And that's just the reality. And it's weird. Like, the draft is weird where, when you play too much, Too much
You know,
information sometimes can hurt you.
we talk about that all the time though, right? Like how sometimes, like as a guy, right, you do so many things. You've been playing so long. The NFL recruits, well, they know who you are, right? There's no
No, you are.
surprises in your game. You know, they know where you're still at. They're watching it, right? And that sometimes can kind of hinder you because maybe they feel like you could do all these things and you can't do this thing, and then they just can't get that thing you can't do out of their head and kind of start to, disregard a little bit the things that you can do. And I think that's
Meanwhile,
going
that guy that only started for 1 year,
right.
and he had a great year, and in their minds they thinking, man, if he gets us a little bit more coaching, if he gets more experience, more playing, he could be able to do this, and this, and they don't, they
He
haven't
never
seen
did
that
it.
one thing.
At the same time, he never did it. But that kind of goes into the last person, I guess, who was drafted in this draft is our quarterback, Will Howard, right? He goes on and, he transferred over. He wins the national championship. And, he's high. Like, everybody's speaking really high about him, about his character, who he is as a leader. Obviously, he was a good enough quarterback to win a national championship, but he goes to end up going to the 6th round to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, you get drafted, it's a blessing. I'm sure, it's not a let down from him, but I think it's a tad bit surprising that, he kind of stayed on the board so long. But once again, he did land at a pretty, solid organization. I know you got your thoughts on the Steelers in the quarterback room, but what's your thoughts on, I guess, Will Howard? And then in general, right, we got to talk about some of these other quarterbacks that kind of sat around a while. Sanders, Ewers, McCord. All these guys kind of sat around a little bit on draft day. Were if you ask me beforehand,
what's my thoughts on the Steelers and their quarterback?
They don't value the position. They don't value.
They don't value the quarterback
position like other teams do. But
my goodness, I've never seen an organization that just doesn't care about quarterbacks. It's like they win in spite of it, but it's like, man, just actually take a concerted effort in trying to find your next quarterback. Actually do it. Yeah, they drafted one quarterback in the 1st round, Kenny Pickett, who went to Pittsburgh and basically practices in the same practice facility as them. No, leave your house to go find a quarterback. Don't draft the guy right there just because that's a guy you've seen all the time. But yeah, Will Howard, I think I wouldn't say suffers from this fact, but I think, Will Howard played a lot of football. And anybody who's watched all of Will Howard's film would have a pretty good idea of who Will Howard is, and probably wouldn't project that he's going to have a ton of growth. Like, like he's going to become somebody else in the next 2-3 years, which he can, but they probably wouldn't project it just because he's played so much football. Right. And I think those limitations that they've identified are limitations that they assume that he will continue to have. So, I think that's part of the reason why he went where he did. I also think, just like Jack Sawyer, I think he ends up in a good situation, given that, the Steelers, I mean, they don't care that much about quarterback. He's gonna get a shot to do something, right? So I think he's in a good situation, good organization. I don't remember where did Ben Roethlisberger get picked? 4th round, maybe?
No, he's a 1st round guy.
He was a 1st round pick.
Yeah, first round.
Okay, but he's a big guy, big quarterback. I think they really like him, and I like him. I like his approach to the game. I like his understanding, his decision making overall. And I feel like nowadays, coaches, organizations, when it comes to the draft, don't put the premium so much on accuracy, decision making for pocket passers as they used to, and they really value the mobile quarterback. And that's where the premium is put at, because of so much success from guys like
Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson,
Hurts,
Josh Allen. List could kind of go on from there. But I think we kind of had spoke about it before the show, because once again, like you say, obviously Will Howard didn't go where we expected, but the same. We're talking about the Steelers a lot. I'm a Cleveland Browns guy. You know that. We end up picking Sanders in the 5th round, right? And then in the 3rd round, we get the mobile quarterback in the Dylan Gabriel, right? But then you look at Ewers, right, who's a 5-star recruit, played a lot of ball at Texas, a lot of good ball at Texas, right? And same thing with McCord. He had 2 seasons. If you look at McCord's stat line for 2 seasons, the numbers are pretty outstanding if you just kind of take it from that standpoint. But I guess I guess, two factors to it. Like you say, it seems like, the NFL has, got more of an emphasis on guys if they're able to move a little bit more mobile. But when you start looking at the lines of like Ewers and Will Howard, they wasn't able to do certain things like other guys was able to do, like go to the Senior Bowl or had time to really prep and get yourself ready for the combine. And then you look at Sanders, who just really chose not to compete in those situations. Do you think that made it weigh the factor as them kind of maybe sliding down the board a little bit and the team feeling comfortable with taking them as their next
Yeah,
quarterback?
I think so. I think when you're not separate, when you haven't already separated yourself from the pack, like you're not just thought of clearly as a guy that's just completely better than the rest of the group or in that top echelon of the group or whatever, you have to create that separation during the draft process. And I think the Senior Bowl is a key. I think the Senior Bowl is more important than the Combine and Pro Day because it's the opportunity. Yeah, we watched your film, we watched your tape, but all that stuff is as it takes into account, a bunch of other factors. When we get you to the Senior Bowl, we get to see you in every single thing you could do in person in our kind of coaches, NFL coaches type atmosphere and scenario. Basically, we get to see you in the meeting rooms. We get to see you take coaching. We get to see you take that to practice and execute it. Players, you get to see them in one-on-ones. Quarterbacks, you get to measure all the things that they can do. And not showing up to that or not participating, I think hurts a lot of guys who are close, right? And that includes, guys that went to Ohio State, went to a national championship, weren't really in a position to go to a Senior Bowl coming off a national championship and that stuff. I think that hurts you, honestly, if you haven't already separated yourself from the pack from, on-field play. So I think that comes into play. And I think guys like Dylan Gabriel, guys like the defensive end that the Bengals drafted, they
No,
only
yeah,
had 4 sacks in 3
out of
years.
AM, yeah,
Yeah.
4 sacks in
Like
3 seasons sound crazy. First round guy, right?
you ask yourself, how can they possibly draft a guy first round who had 4 sacks in 3 seasons? But look, he's a high rated guy coming out of high school. He's expected to have all this talent or whatever. And then they go to the Senior Bowl and they see this guy coming off the ball, doing all this moving. The coach says, look, if I get him on my team, I could coach him up and he could be this guy. So I think those things are important. I think what's interesting though is yours was, I remember his rating coming out of high school, like a perfect rate.
Oh, he's almost rating, yeah, almost
Yeah,
perfect, right,
it
right,
was
right.
perfect, like the highest
One of the
rated
highest rated guys
prospect.
ever. Yeah, yeah.
And it feels like that's going into NFL with the premium on mobile quarterbacks, guys who can move and do all those things. It seems like probably shouldn't have been, right? Like I don't know, you know.
That's weird, man. It's tough to say because like we said, we're thinking it's one thing, but it could be other things, right? Like with Sanders, with Ewers, right? Like what is the perception of these guys, right? Obviously with Sanders, they're a very confident bunch, right? And like you said, I think we try to support them. But as we know, as we've seen the prank phone calls start coming in to him and other quarterbacks and things of that nature, other people, don't care so much about, some of the things that he doing, him being maybe so, what they say he was confident, like he overconfident, things of that kind of nature that they kind of start to put on him. And then you never know, right? But what are the people in the building saying about these guys? Like, we know the NFL does a lot of research on guys, and then when research meaning talk to your high school coach, talk to your position coach, talk to the guy in the weight room. Just to like, hey, what's your opinion of this guy as a person? You never know how that things go. So obviously, we don't know if these things happen, but
Yeah,
it could been a factor when you start looking at certain guys. You're just like, man, I thought he'd be XYZ, and all of a sudden they just, they end up nowhere near it. It just kind of, put a little thought in your head, like, well, maybe it's more to it that's not, on social media, not in an article.
yeah. I think it's a factor. And so this thing is not a perfect science. I always say this: football and evaluating is not a perfect science. I tweeted the other day that there's not a big difference between an NFL GM evaluating a quarterback and an NFL fan evaluating a quarterback at this point. Right? They're very close. But the reality is all that stuff is taken into account. And I think the more physical gifts and talents you have, the more leeway they give you with being an a-hole. like you can get away with a little bit more if you have certain physical gifts. If they feel like Shedeur Sanders can run a 4.3, and you talk about all that stuff that may or may not have played a factor, it would play much less factor if they felt like, if things break down, he could just take off and run for 50 yards. And that's just that's the way it is. The more you don't fit this prototypical athlete who has a high ceiling, the more you got to check every box. Show up to the Senior Bowl, impress in the interviews, talk to the coaches, be confident, but be confident in a way that doesn't rub us the wrong way, so that we trust you. Like, so I think there's all these different scales or different boxes that you need to check, and if you're missing a few of them, you have to overperform in some of the others, and that's just how it is, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, so but kind of going into the kind of wrap up the draft, we had a few guys that didn't get drafted. Seth ended up going to Cincinnati. It's tough for Seth, right? He ended up getting hurt later in the year. Most likely, he's the Remington winner. So, number one center in college football. So those guys usually go, second, third round at the latest. He ends up not getting drafted, but he lands in a good spot in Cincinnati. And obviously, because him not getting drafted, we didn't quite tie that record that we was shooting for, trying to get 15 guys drafted to tie the Georgia record. But 14 guys is nothing to snuff at, right? So definitely had a good year there. Josh Fryer goes to the Cardinals. He joins his former offensive line coach here at Ohio State out there in the desert. And then G. Scott joins the Patriots to kind of round out our, I'm going to say our senior class, whether the senior or underclassmen, whatever you want to call them. But our guys going on to the next level from there. We had a couple transfers, Jim. We got Justin Terry, offensive tackle out of West Virginia. He joins the Ohio State. He actually is from Pinkerton, so he kind of got the chip to come home to be a Buckeye. Yeah. That always got to feel good for him. And then we also land a defensive lineman that Coach Day stated we was looking for in the portal. We was looking for some defensive linemen, and we get Bo Atkinson out of North Carolina. And we will have to note that we missed, though, Moran Watson from Syracuse. Ends up going to Texas. Texas got 5 defensive tackles out the portal.
5 defensive tackles. And defensive tackle was the position, more so than anyone else on Ohio State's current roster, that, don't take it from me, that Ryan Day has mentioned that they have to step it up. So, yeah, that's a miss. And, in today's day and age, money plays a factor. Yes, and it's not in a negative way. It's just money plays a factor. If in any job market, in the capitalist environment, money's a factor. And in this current NCAA environment, money plays a factor. And Texas clearly put some money out for some defensive tackles. And Texas is obviously a good destination, but 5 defensive tackles.
Yeah,
That's
I wonder what the budget looked like for the defensive line. Maybe they won some money, though, on Bet Online. Man, I'm just joking, man. Bet Online. But, hey, if you're watching the playoffs, though, man, our Lakers are not doing so hot. But my Cavs are doing fantastic. I think they got the sweep this evening. But if you're looking for any action when it comes to NBA playoffs, feel free to check it out on Bet Online. It's also baseball season, hockey, NHL's in the playoffs as well. So, yeah, Bet Online is the place to be when it comes to making your – I don't know. I was about to say investments, but you're feeling lucky, right?
Yeah, don't call it investments, man. Don't call it investments. BetOnline is a place to get all your information, news, stats, to really create your approach to betting. So,
yeah. So, but that's our show for today. Obviously, next week we're coming to you a little bit more, following up with our Buckeyes. One huge shout out to Coach Day. Kept all of his scholarship players out of the portal after the spring. I think he said he had a nice cold beer after that, so shout out to that. And the Buckeye culture of trying to repeat as national championships. We bringing guys in. We're not letting guys out the door because, hey, they want to play at it, and they want to be the best, man, right? So we end our show always with a nice OH.
Oh,
go Bucks. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Go Bucks.